what's really important for female athletes is that we want to maintain, we want to keep, we've got to fight like hell, if I'm allowed to say that, for those fast twitch muscle fibers. Meaning, what does that fast twitch mean? It means that we want to keep that force. We want to keep the force and the ability for our muscles to pick something up.
Yes.
Right. And if we don't use it, we are going to lose it, particularly as our estrogen is lowering.
I'm really excited today to introduce you guys to Tenille Hoogland. Tenille's a coach who specializes in, well, basically you cover everything. You like cycling, you like swimming, you like triathlon, you name it. But she's really, really passionate about the female athlete. And being a mother herself, she really understands all the different aspects of what we as females who want to exercise have to deal with. Now, Tenille's background started in synchronized swimming, actually, where she was an Olympic hopeful. And then she eventually moved on to triathlons, but not just any day triathlons. She even represented Canada in Ironman and really long distance triathlons. Now, Tenille, tell me about your own sporting passion. How did you end up being a coach? Because I know you also did a lot of project management and things for the Olympics. How did you get to where you are?
It was a very circuitous, like, first of all, thank you for having me. And yeah, my journey has not been straight. And I've had a great mentor in Silken Lauman, who is a multiple Olympian and yeah, medalist at the Olympics. And she said to me, she said, don't worry, all your paths, like all the pieces of your life will make sense at one point. And I finally arrived and they all make sense, but boy, did I ever, I scanned every aspect of sport really that one could. So yeah, I started as a synchronized swimmer when I was in, and that's, I don't know why, I just loved synchronized swimming. And I ended up stopping at age 16. I had moved out actually very young age and to just train and live the life of an elite athlete. And so after a year, that career, that sport due to some real significant challenges with the coaching.
Okay.
Yeah, really ended that whole dream of the Olympics. And so then I had a big break, and then I did university. I did a BA in psychology, thinking I really wanted to understand sports psychology, like what in the world happened and why was I so lost, and what was my whole identity, all those kind of issues. And then I moved into leading multi-sport trips on bikes and running and coming into a whole new world of being athletic and sharing the joy of sport with others. And then I did a master's of public administration because I wanted to change policy, which led me to working for the government and changing policy in sport and thinking about international sport and drugs in sport, and then the Olympics. And I started becoming a planner, and because I evidently love planning. And so then I started planning for the Olympics. And then I was like, oh my goodness, I have this dream of the Olympics. It's not gone yet. Shoot, I better get going. So then I became, at the ripe old age of 27, I was like, okay, I gotta do this. I'm gonna do this triathlon thing. I know how to bike. I know how to run. And I certainly was a good swimmer. So then I just started training really hard, and I eventually just went for it. And a number of years I just committed my career in the federal government as a senior planner for the Olympics. When the Olympics started in Vancouver in 2010, that is when I actually, they were starting on February 12th, and I took a leave to just train full time in the January. As a planner, my planning was done. Like, I had done all the work, and now it was into the implementation team. And they went off and hosted a beautiful Olympics. And I went into career of a professional triathlete. So then then, oh wow, did I ever learn more about being an athlete? Yeah, then I lost my period for 5 years, and yeah, so I started having a lot of difficulties.
Yeah, I would imagine.
I was highly undernourished. Okay. And I, had the experience of, I went to registered dietitians. I went and I tried to get help, and this was a different time. So I really wanted, I had wonderful coaching, and I had coaches that did everything they could with the knowledge that they had, but it was a different time. And they certainly, talking about your period was just never even, like, that's just not even considered. Like, it wasn't part of our language at all, and still rarely is. And the other, like, there were so many other things that started happening in my experience of being an athlete that I was like, okay, I need to start getting educated, because nobody knows what's going on. So that's when I went and I started and I went to Simon Fraser University for nutrition and did a certification with them. And I just started learning and trying to understand what's going on. Why does my body keep breaking down? Why, like, I have so much passion. I have so much grit. I'm so mentally tough. What is it that I'm missing? And just trying to figure it out. And I had success. When you work really, 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 really hard, and you can have success, but it wasn't a lasting success. It wasn't a sustainable success. And through that, I started understanding, like, okay, there's something I'm missing here. And so I furthered again my nutrition, and furthered again trying to understand it. And I became a race director. So then I started understanding it from the other side of, like, how do we put together these races, and what's going on behind the scene. And just one thing led to another. I ended up working for the National Federation here in Canada for triathlon. And again, just seeing what is excellence in sport, and how are we understanding excellence in sport, and how are we supporting from the ground, from the developmental age up to our masters athletes, and what is it that we can do better, and what is missing. And I didn't understand until then. I had my first child, and I was like, I want, where's my joy point? And my joy was being on the side of a pool deck and working with people and making a real difference in their lives, and making it real tangible. And so that's when I was like, I want to be a coach that really sees the whole athlete, because I have the knowledge now, that also there's more research now on the female athlete. We can start pulling these things together. And I'm very, where I sit now is more like, I support, my coaching is for athletes in perimenopause and beyond. And let me tell you, like, what does athlete mean? I think this is like part of the question, right? It's like, it's funny because most people would be like, oh, but you're like serious. And then if you ask the athletes in my roster, they'd be just like, oh my goodness, I am like so not. And then they go on about how they're not really serious. So there's, it's always about who you're comparing yourself to, right? And so what we come into is, some people have goals that happen to be races. Some people have goals that happen to be atop of a mountain. Some people have goals that happen to be, I want to be able to play with my grandkid. And so, and what is it that we all in common, when we start thinking about how do we want to be active in life, we can start coming into the same principles.
And it's interesting. Sorry if I can interrupt there for a moment. It's interesting that you say that, because I see so many women over the age of, let's call it 48, when the menopause starts to kick in, and they won't describe themselves as sporty, but they're active people. They like doing walking, they like being active, just doing little bits of everything. But then what they don't realize is that the menopause and everything affects them even in those activities, and that you have to approach the whole, just the word athlete is nearly a misnomer for somebody who wants to be active, because it doesn't matter how active you want to be, that's relative to you. and it still affects your body. And all the principles that apply to a top athlete actually applies to you, but maybe just in a little bit of a different way.
Yeah, absolutely. I've created what I call the MNT, our integrated training system. And in that system, it has at the very found, there's all these triangles, and for the mindset, the nutrition, the training, the recovery. And at the foundation, we all have to have the foundation. So for example, one of the foundations is breathing. It seems like it's like such a it seems it should be assumed that we all know how to breathe.
Yeah.
But we don't. We really don't.
Are we talking about breathing just sitting down or while you're exercising? Because, okay, yeah, I've got you here. I can ask you. Do you know how many of my friends have said to me they can't run because they can't breathe through their nose while they're running? And I'm like, I'm sure you don't. You're not meant to breathe only through your nose while you're running. And then I thought it was hilarious the first time I heard it. And then I realized, no, people take the same principle as yoga breathing and try and apply it while they're running. And then they don't understand why they get out of breath. So perhaps you can talk a bit about that.
Okay, so this is such a perfect kind of question, because it's going to point to something that I want to kind of dive into. So coaches, right? Like what is a coach? What is a coach in? And somebody is coming in and they're wanting to understand, how do I first approach my training? What do I do most efficiently? How do I get the most bang out of my back? Because, we're all busy. We have lots of things that we want to do. How do I eat, sleep, all these things? And, here we're talking about breathing. And this is an expertise all into it is, people will come into and just really come into, how do you breathe? How is it that is it nose breathing? So there's a huge popularity. It's, from Oxygen Advantage, and I'm just going to the name is going to slip right now. And just as I want to pull it up. And this idea of nose breathing, because then you're expanding your nostrils, you're keeping it, there's just so many different ways of thinking about it. And what I would say is that it's more about our diaphragm. It's about our pelvic floor. It's about being able to relax. It's about our core strength. And if we're always breathing up from here, so when, you can even do this exercise right now. So if we're just take a deep breath in through your nose. So and now take a deep breath only in through your mouth.
Yeah, it's much higher, isn't it?
It's hard to get. You don't get the depth of your breath in through your mouth. So, but what happens is that when we start exercising, we automatically want to just start mouth breathing, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And so what we want to teach ourselves is how to relax. And when we're in an aerobic state, we might want to really lengthen or try to breathe in through our nose and then exhale nice and long through our mouth. Or it could be, if this is a practice, to keep yourself in an aerobic state. This is getting right into you see how quickly we can dive into some things.
You're going to have to explain what an aerobic state is. What do you mean?
So we have we have a different way of just thinking about a car starting, right? So when you're starting, when you first start and you're accelerating in the gas, you're just kind of going, and the most efficient driving of a car is your aerobic state, right? When you're on the highway, you can watch your level of the gas usage, you keep it down.
Okay.
When you are somebody who loves just gunning it off the gas, the green light goes and you're just yes, I'm going to beat that person right beside me. You've got to think about what you're using in terms of the energy, and you're using a whole different energy source. Glucose, you're using, you're converting glycogen. This is coming into it. That is anaerobic, right? Because when we are just using our aerobic, so the most efficient, we're using fat, we're able to convert fat, we're able to go for a really long time. The perceived effort is about a 3 to 4 out of 10. That's easy.
Okay.
That's aerobic. And so what we think about when you're thinking about, can I breathe through my nose? So coming back to the original question.
Because I'm still trying to think, how am I going to breathe through my nose while I run?
Right. It's the idea is most people won't be able to breathe through their nose when they run. I can't.
Okay.
Oh, like I would consider myself rather fit,
Yes.
but I immediately, like, it's this idea of getting used to, you know, you don't have a lack of oxygen. Like, you can wear an oxygen meter, like a pulsometer thing, and you have plenty of oxygen in your blood. Like, don't worry. Nothing's going to happen. But it's whether you can tolerate the CO2. You want that oxygen to be released. There's a whole mechanism within that. So what is happening is that you are not tolerating this exchange as easily. So the idea behind nose breathing, which is a whole practice, is that you stay in an aerobic state, trying to release the oxygen that you have available, because people get into a hype state more quickly. So at the end of the day, breathe the way you need to breathe, and use the talk test like in an aerobic state. So can I easily have a conversation? If you cannot, then you're not aerobic. You're not going easy. Really easy, right? So okay, we've kind of like gone on a whole tangent there.
Sorry.
But this is the point, right? Like, it's coming back into, you're coming into the, you know, how we started saying, what is the foundation? It's breathing. What's next? Sleep. What is your coach, you know, is your coach saying to you, or is somebody who's guiding, or are you supporting yourself to say, you know, particularly in perimenopause and beyond, being like, okay, I had a really, you come in, you're just like, I just do not feel like doing this. I had another night of really challenged sleep. And my answer to you would be, sleep is the most fundamental recovery. Like, this is how we stay strong. This is how we need our sleep. We need our recovery. So instead of doing that high intensity training session, if you really are not feeling well, then I want you to open up I want you to open up the opportunity to say, what would be good for my body right now? It might be that high intensity interval training session, but it might actually be something like a walk in the woods, in which we can bring down the stress, that chronic stress. We can bring and nourish our body. We can, and you know, this is where we want to have the permission and understanding of, like, how is it that we support our body? And that's for an elite athlete, or for somebody who is going through perimenopause or beyond, or has a lot of work stress. This could be for men, this could be for women. It doesn't matter. It's like, it's making the assumption that you love to do this activity. You're already invested in your health.
Yeah. And tell me, because you've got children yourself, how do you juggle that bit? Because it can be hard to actually have the energy to train hard, plus bring up small children and do a job at the same time as well.
Such a good question. You know, there's a whole lot of self-compassion work that goes on for myself. Like, you know, like, I'll be really honest, it's sometimes hard. It's hard for me because I don't have the energy to go after what is my personal best.
Gotcha.
I have let go of what I can do. Like, I know if I trained really hard and I was focused and I had the energy, that I could rip it up. Like, I could do really well, right? Like, I have that in me. And it's so not about that. For me right now.
So your priorities have basically changed. It's about actually accepting that shift then.
It's about accepting that I every day make a choice on what I choose to do. I choose to jump on the trampoline with my kids. Or I choose to, and that doesn't mean that I still am not taking care of, like, I lead spin classes with my athletes. I did one this morning. It was fantastic. I love it. It got my heart rate up. It's fantastic. Like, and that's it then.
Yeah.
So it's part of, I maintain, I'm very much invested in the longevity because I have two very active kids. And if I don't stay active, if I don't stay strong,
Yeah.
they're going to kick my butt and I won't get to play with them.
Yeah.
Right?
Exactly.
Like that motivates me. Holy smokes. Like,
so then if you think of a female athlete, anybody who wants to be active, what are the three, what's the three most important things you feel needs to be covered in their training plan? If you could only choose three.
Yeah. So this, I'll specify it to, actually, I think that you could say this for anybody, but I'm really focused on the athlete that is between 35 and up anyway. Like you could just, and this would be for, again, while I'm focused on the female athlete, this could be for men as well. Although the training would be slightly different for them. Number one is intensity.
Okay.
We have a barometer that I think that we need to reset. And what is having a good night's sleep? What can we kind of come across as like, what can we get away with? And, 6 to 7 hours is not ideal. Like 7 hours is you're getting closer. Yeah. 7 to 8 hours is good. And we have come into a way of being that we are getting used to suboptimal. It goes the same with intensity of exercise. Okay. If for my athletes, what's really important, and for female athletes, is that we want to maintain, we want to keep, we've got to fight like hell, if I'm allowed to say that, for those fast twitch muscle fibers. Meaning, what does that fast twitch mean? It means that we want to keep that force. We want to keep the force and the ability for our muscles to pick something up.
Yes.
Right. And if we don't use it, we are going to lose it, particularly as our estrogen is lowering.
And I think I guess it's worth also just saying here, for those who don't know how the menopause affects your body, that is one of the big components that happens when your estrogen and everything starts dropping, is that your fast twitch muscles, those ones that can give you the powerful contractions, are the ones that suffer the most. And that's why it's so important to maintain them.
So important. Yeah, because that's where we start to lose muscle mass. And, what is it that once we start to lose muscle mass, there's a whole cascade of events that is going to occur on that, resting metabolic rate, how we actually burn and utilize calories, and how we can keep doing things, how our whole structure of our body can stay strong, how we can keep lifting things over our head. So we want to maintain that intensity. So how I work with my athletes is first saying, okay, so let's just know where you are right now. Let's get present to what is an intensity session for you? What is a 3 to 4 out of 10? What is a 5 out of 10, a 6 out of 10, a 7, an 8, a 9, a 10 out of 10? How is it that we can start to keep on bringing up that ability? Because we start at this point, like every athlete that I've ever had will start at one level, and then they learn to tolerate more. Oh, I feel safe, because that's what it ends up being. I feel safe doing that amount, because the last time I did it, I didn't die. I can do it this time. Exactly. And so now I know that I can do that. I can do a little more. And it's our body being like, oh, and it's also the ability to take in glucose, like its ability for, like, that's going to help our blood sugar response. Like, there's so many benefits that are coming. And this is where the nutrition comes into the training component. It's like, when we start to activate and hit those intensities, then we're actually doing our body good in a whole other way. So we're keeping our muscle mass, we're improving our blood glucose, we're increasing that cortisol, which is amazing, so that it can come down. So we're now working with our hormones and supporting our hormones to have what the second point would be, and that's variability.
Okay.
And So intensity, I just also want to say is intensity is, before I move on to variability, we have to think of intensity as dosing. Like in order to hit intensity, you don't want to hit it all that much.
Yeah.
So my athletes hit it twice, maybe 3 times a week.
Okay. Yeah.
That's it. And because they have to show up, and they want to show up.
And
because
I think it's also it's empowering, isn't it? You see people who kind of go, I'm even put off by the word intensity because that's not me. I can't train that hard. And then when they start seeing, oh wait, it's relative to me, and I could actually do this session, and how your confidence grows because you start seeing that, oh, my body's tolerating it. I can actually do more than what I could do a month ago. It's really brilliant.
Oh, it's fun.
Yes.
Like it's even fun. It's like when you see people like in their numbers and they're just feeling better, and they're like, this is where metrics and this is where data becomes meaningful, right? It's being able to say, this is what I did, this is the time I invested, this is what I got out of it.
Yes.
Full stop. Right? And so and when we come into the intensity and being also deliberately aerobic, most people love that 5 out of 10. It's not aerobic. 5 out of 10 is not aerobic. That's a chronic stress state.
I'm definitely not showing you my Garmin load thing. You know, that orange one in the middle? It's like...
Yeah. And this is where we want to understand what is, I mean, this is where, you know, metabolic health starts coming in and starting to understand, okay, so how do we train? I definitely am in that polarized model of, when you're going to go hard, let's do it right. Okay. Let's go hard. When you're going to go aerobic, let's go aerobic and build up that foundation, because that is your foundation. That is your mitochondrial foundation. While you can get that anaerobic state by, like, you can build your foundation in part by doing that HIIT training. That's in the research. It's clear. But at some point you're going to hit a ceiling. Yeah. And it's dependent on that foundation again. So it's like you can get so far and then you've got to build about, and then you can get so far and then you got to build it out. And that's just time.
Yeah. And you know what, you say that so flippantly, but that's the bit that people don't understand, is the time it takes to build a body stronger in a safe way. Because I also, we've developed an app for sports injuries, but the person that one of the co-founders, I actually met him through online consultation after he ran his first ultramarathon and got a horrendous tendinopathy and several other injuries. And what happened was, he's a really driven person, and he started running, actually at that point at the job he was doing with colleagues, and did really well. So he ramped it up quite quickly, and lo and behold, decided ultramarathon within, I think he tried to do it within a year or 2 years of starting running. Now you can see where the problem is, and it's also not just a flat ultramarathon. It was really, really mountainous. So then it's taken him 3 years to properly get over all the injuries he ramped up in that. And it's the bit that people don't understand, is the reason why somebody can tolerate such a large training load, and if you're new to it, you can't, is they have years and years of the tendons and everything strengthening and building up over time. And that's why patience is a very, very important part.
Oh, it's so important. Yeah, I think that progression, everything, progression, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, okay, so we've got high intensity, we've got variability. What's the third one?
Variability, and then the third one is consistency. And by consistency, I mean, what I really want to state with consistency is showing up for yourself and being consistent in that. So becoming present to, how are you doing today? What is there for you today? And if we are intentional about what we are trying to achieve, then we can show up with consistency. Consistency doesn't always mean grit. It doesn't always mean just getting it done. Consistency, in my mind, or how I want to share with my athletes and the people I work with is being able to say, all right, I'm going to give it a go and see how my body shows up. I'm going to, or it could be in nutrition. It could be like, okay, so how is it that I'm going to try to make some changes and I'm going to try to increase protein? Very popular, right? Like we, as female athletes, perimenopause beyond, need to increase protein. And so, but I'm going to start with the small spot, you know, I'm going to start with breakfast. I'm going to start trying to just eat eggs. I'm going to add in a scoop of a protein powder into my smoothie in the morning. I am going to, you know, have some cottage cheese. I'm going to, and it's trying to show up for yourself consistently in that one small thing. It could be, I am not going to judge myself if I, you know, I'm not able to achieve this thing. I am going to just be like, did I do my best? Yes. With what I had. Did I, if I couldn't do the training session because too many other things came into my day, then what is it? Then, you know, you're showing up for yourself. You're like, I did something. I went for a walk. It was 20 minutes. Yesterday, I did a 20-minute run. Literally, it was 20 minutes. Like, it felt awesome. I put the clothes on. I went for 20 minutes. That included the warm up. I did 4 hill sprints, and then I came home. That was it.
I have a feeling we have the same psychological tendency sometimes. Like, just find a hill, run up it really fast a few times, and then go.
Yeah. And did I feel good? Absolutely.
Exactly.
Could have I, you know, maybe run a little bit longer if I had the time? Yes. But did I have more time? No.
Exactly. And what you could have done instead was you could have said, well, then it's not worth going out, and then you would have felt miserable. So yeah, no. So one of the things that people always ask me, and we've spoken a bit about the sleep aspect and the nutrition aspect and everything, but it's recovery after a training session. How do you know that you are actually recovered? What are the signs and things that you tell your athletes to look out for, that maybe they need more recovery? What's the typical things? What do you use?
Oh, it's such a great question. My goodness. So there's a number of ways to take a look at it. So if you, first of all, we look for trends. So let's go to the data. So if we look for trends and notice heart rate variability would be something. So if our heart rate variability is really tanking. Okay. And I don't ever look at one day. I want to see, and I want to look at, you know, well, what if the person has a lot of flow in their life, meaning that Mondays are usually Mondays and Fridays are usually Fridays and the weekends usually you're doing whatever, I'll look on that day rather than looking on the day before, because your Mondays might be completely different.
You're using the data from the watch,
whatever people have. Like, so I mean, I use the Aura ring. Garmin's a popular one. We're just using the same tool. Okay. And understanding that that's going to be your tool. Don't try to compare tools. Like, it's just like it, because none of it is really, the error range is so there, like there's such a big error range, but you're just trying to understand, is there something that would help me understand my body if I'm just not sure. Gotcha. So also it could be, am I hitting my numbers? Am I able to meet the intention of the workout? It's really important that my athletes understand what the intention is. And then so that's the data, the data piece. Then there's the psychological piece. And one thing, I'm very privileged in that I work with people who want to show up. Gotcha. Like, I think we all can find the things that light us up in terms of physical activity. I happen to work with endurance athletes in either, you know, in triathlons or cycling or running. And their way of being is that they want to move. Yes. They want to move their bodies. They love moving their bodies. They feel good when they move their bodies. They don't necessarily always want to do that hard workout. Honestly, like this morning we did 10 times 15 seconds, really hard. It's called sprint interval training. And I was like, so how's everybody feeling about this? And then there's this like, ugh. right? And then we started, and then we had some fun, and then everybody felt awesome afterwards. But it's not that there's something there, so that when that thing that is helping you show up isn't there, then I worry. It's like when your motivation, when you're losing sight of you just don't want to do it, you're just not recovered.
Yeah.
Because that's not who you actually, at your true sense of self of what you're wanting to do is what it's being.
Gotcha.
And I think it's a really, really important point, because that's the cycle of overtraining. That's the cycle of way too many workouts that are a 5 out of 10.
Yeah.
You're not working hard, and you're not working easy. You're just working all the time. You're on a treadmill.
Absolutely. And the tricky one I find with people, and especially when they're coming back from injury, is that mismatch of the strength of the tissue that's now recovered, but it's not fully strength yet, versus cardiovascular strength. And I find it's quite hard to get that, because now they've stayed active, they've cross-trained, so they're super fit, and they can ramp their running up very quickly, but we all know what happens if they do that, because the body's just not strong enough. It's not gone through enough cycles of strengthening. How do you hold your athletes back in a sensible way? How do they get over the psychological thing of having to go slow to be able to actually go back? Or, I mean, if I listen to your history of not having a period for 5 years, you must have had a few injuries there. What psychological tips do you have to cope with that bit of accepting it and getting on with it?
Yeah, I think there's a number of things that you can do. I think, first of all, understanding it. Like, I didn't know what I know now. And I didn't have anybody to explain it or help me understand and educate me on what's actually happening with tendons and ligaments, and particularly in perimenopause, and how the estrogen is going down and also influencing that. I didn't, so just coming into, this is why the progression is important, period. So, and then understanding, okay, so if I really want to get, because, runners want that adrenaline. Like, we want that adrenaline kick when we go. And what's what we're missing? We'll find it somewhere else.
Well, here's another question, and this is for me. I don't care about anybody else here. How do you get somebody who loves running to take up cycling or swimming for a while when they hate those activities?
So, I mean, hate is a very strong word. So I guess I would say, what is it about that you don't like? So what is it about the cycling? Is it getting out into the traffic? Is it the amount of work that it takes to set yourself up? What is it that is causing the challenge of that other activity? Swimming can be hard because it's so much technique. And like, you're gassed and you're halfway through the length. It's just like, okay, like, what is going on here? This is just not fun, right? I mean, imagine somebody who's never run in their life. That's what they think, right? They're just like, I can't get down the block without it being hard. This is really not fun. So it's the same idea. So but I would think, particularly from the cycling, the running to the cycling component, is what about, like, first of all, is there an opportunity for you to like release into the, I'm going to try this thing, and then coming into a place of, I would actually prefer to sit on a stationary bike and do a Zwift. Like, can this actually be fun? Can I join a spin, a class? Again, I would say, like, choose wisely.
Like, okay. I am not letting my patients into a spin class.
No, like, that's where I would be like, be smart about what you're doing. Like, be really careful, because there's a lot out there that is so much hype. Like, it is like, we can make you work hard.
The lights go.
The lights go, and then we're doing pumping on the brake. Like that. I'm just like, I don't even know what that's going on. Like, what's the intention of this workout? I have no idea what the intention of the workout is. But I think like an athlete. So I'm just like, I like to know what the point is. Gotcha. So I don't like to work. I like to do it, you know, it's kind of a little bit funny. So I like to expend as little energy doing everything that I possibly can. I'm like, I don't want to spend extra energy on anything.
Yeah. Just because you can bite down and make things happen doesn't mean you want to work really hard to get things done.
Oh no.
Okay.
And it's actually the opposite. You want to always conserve as much energy as possible, no matter what you're doing, because you're selfish. You want to keep the energy in. But anyways, so to your point, what could I do to cross train? I think it's finding the lights of like, well, maybe there would be something there for me that I can actually do that would make it enjoyable. And honestly, it's connecting with people, I think, the biggest piece. To kind of like switch it up. If you are a runner that just loves to be on your own,
yeah,
then that's like your soul place, right? And what is it, you know, what is it about that you're missing there from the run? And if you're on the bike, where is it that it's just going to look different? It just has to look different.
But I think the important thing you also said was just what is it that's blocking you from actually doing it? Because you want to be fit, you don't want to be miserable on the couch, but why are you not doing it? Because if you don't figure out that why, it's not going to go away and it's going to keep on stopping you from going out the door. Okay, so I've got a few quick questions for you because I know we've been going on for nearly an hour. So if you don't mind me firing them off at you.
Well, fire away.
Okay, so is there anything a truth that used to be the truth in coaching that you don't agree with anymore, but that you still hear quite a lot?
Yeah. I think that, you know, what's coming to my mind, just is like, if you really want it, just work harder. Like that's what I was just like, if I just really want something, I just have to work hard for it. I just have to work really hard. And bringing that hyper intensity to something, and this comes into like an idea of cycle, right? Like if we just think about everything has a cycle. Everything has cycle. So seasons are in cycle. The day and night is cycle. Menstrual cycle. The running, you know, if you think of any movement, is in a cycle of contraction and release. And yet how athletes or how people want to achieve something, it doesn't even have to be just in an athletic endeavor. It can be into a business endeavor. We just want to really go for it. We just want to give her. And without acknowledging that we have to build in both the grit and the recovery, and the grit and the recovery, and the grit and the recovery. And that's how we can find consistency. That's how we can actually start building on. I didn't do that. I still have a hard time doing that, actually. I go really hard. I really try. I'm just like, I've got this.
And then the body goes, I'm made of proteins and I need to recover.
And and I'm much better about that, like in the body, but I still do it in the other aspects of my life. Like where we show up in sport is how we show up in like
yeah.
Right. So this is a learning that I just have to keep on coming back to again and again and again, and trying to, you know, balance that. Now I've maybe gone on the other side of like, I'm taking it too easy and I don't have those same, like, you know, you need to kind of know that, you know, the Goldilocks rule of the stress of like, you want a little stress because then you keep on growing. If you don't have any stress, then you're just kind of like, meh.
And tell me, if you had somebody who really wants to get fit, they're motivated, they have just entered the perimenopause and they do not like what they feel is happening to their body. What's the best tip that you can give them if you could only tell them one thing to try and avoid injuries and get on this really more of a healthy, active lifestyle that's consistent rather than going boom and bust and ending up with injuries?
Yeah, start small and start with something that you can find real joy in. So what does that look like? It might be walking. Brilliant. Start with walking. Like right? Like, where are you starting from? Everybody has a different starting point. I think that's really, really important. And so if you are somebody who has really struggled to, come into, like, you just haven't been consistent. You don't have an exercise routine at all. You're moving, but you have no routine of it. Then try to figure out, what is the intention? What is it, a goal that I want to have that I can start to create and keep it really small?
I totally agree with that one. And I feel a little bit embarrassed when I think of my younger self in my 20s, you know, that bulletproof phase where you think, wow, this person walking is not exercise. It's amazing how walking is the exercise these days, especially if I've had a period where I couldn't go running and things. That it's just where I've got to start, where my body goes, yeah, that's where we're going again.
Walking. It's brilliant.
So tell me, brilliant. What's your favorite snack when you do sports events? So longer rides or runs, what do you like?
Oh, I make these little, like, I call them bliss balls. And they have either a date, kind of like, they're kind of like Lara bars. I don't know if people know what Lara bars are, but like they're better because they're homemade. So they have like date.
Can we buy them online yet?
Not well. You can go get the recipe if you just go to like Tenille. I think it's on actually. I have a couple of websites, but it's on TenilleHoogland.com. I think that one is on. They have all these recipes.
I'll find it and put it in the description of this video, by the way, guys.
For sure, yeah. And they're just like these little bites of just genius, and you can add different things. So you, like, if you feel like you're a real salty sweater, you can add a little more salt. If you want a little bit more fat, then you can add a little more coconut. You can make them chocolatey, or you can add a little bit of raisin in them and make them like cinnamon raisin bites. Or you can, I actually cook quinoa and I put the quinoa in it and make them into little balls, and then you make sure you like refrigerate them so they're hard, because they will, like the quinoa ones do get a little bit soft. But they're so good.
I'm going to send you a picture of my bag. I could just imagine it goes.
Oh yeah, no, because they'll actually, because you put coconut oil in it. Okay. Well, it depends how hot. Like right now we're in a heat wave, so all the coconut oil is just like melting away, right? But they get kind of hard too, so you gotta.
Gotcha. And tell me, when you're done exercising, what's your recovery? What's your snack or your what do you like to have as a meal to kind of top up if you've done well, I know it'll probably be different between a high intensity session or like typically a long distance race. What would you do after a marathon? Because what I do is I have lots of beers and like basically burger and chips, which I have the photo evidence of. That is why I run a marathon, to eat. But I have a feeling it's not the best thing to eat after a marathon.
Oh, I think you should totally go for it. But I would say is that the timing is really important, particularly for females. So honestly, what I do is I take the protein shake.
Gotcha.
I just do it. It's nothing exciting. It's not particularly brilliant, but it's effective, and it gets me through. And then I will try to eat appropriately within the window. Like that's my immediate. And then I say, particularly if you've just run a marathon, I think you go for it. Like, hello, let's celebrate. And if celebrating is having burgers, which for me it is, and burgers and fries are, it doesn't go well it doesn't sit well necessarily afterwards, but darn does it go down well.
Exactly.
Right.
And what do you do exercise wise these days? Are you still doing races or anything?
Well, yeah. So I'm very privileged, like, to have this level of fitness that I can throw myself into a race when I want to. And I do I have a race team. It's Element Race Team, and we represent what's possible. So basically it's athletes that are, we've got some young ones that have come in because of daughters of mothers. So we have this beautiful range of, 25-year-olds up to 50, in their 50s. And so they race, and when they race, I will sometimes show up and just put myself on a start line for a cycling race. But I'm just I'm just staying fit. Like, honestly,
Okay,
like
yeah.
I bike when I lead my spin sessions. That's great. Like, I went on a 20-minute, run yesterday. It was on holiday and I was swimming in the ocean, and just, I actually I wanted to know my distance, and I was like, how did that go? Just like, my mom was like, don't tell me. She doesn't want to know how far she's swimming every day. And I'm like, I want to know, get the Garmin out. So, I just keep going, and I am intentional about my intensity, and I do strength training. I think that I can't say enough. One must, that's pretty strong language. You need to do some strength work. It doesn't necessarily have to start in a gym. Eventually, you may want to go to a gym because you're going to get stronger, and it'll get harder to do deliberate strength work outside of a gym. But there's a lot you can do. For example, on a beach, you could pick up a log, move the log, like rocks, moving rocks, like there's a lot of things you can do just to, like all these things that just happen to be in your life that you can be like, I am going to just keep on lifting heavy stuff. Don't be giving a bags of groceries. No, you're lifting your groceries. Like, find the things that are hard to do and do them.
That is really good advice. Thank you so much. Tenille, it's been brilliant to have you on. I think we can talk for several hours, but I'm going to call it a day here. So tell me, if anybody wants to get in touch with you, where do they find you? How can they get hold of you?
Yeah, for sure. elementsportscoaching.com is one place. You athletes thriving in perimenopause and beyond in the Facebook group. I'm not very good on Instagram. I know it's a place that people go.